Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Jane. I am the owner of RSM Run Coaching, and I always place my coaching information below if you're ever interested in that. But really today I'm here to talk to you about the first marathon that I've ever truly run just for fun, and that was in the Dopey Challenge. So not just a marathon, but the entire Dopey Challenge at Walt Disney World this past weekend. So I think perfect way to start out is, what is the Dopey Challenge? What does it entail? So this is 4 days of running, starting on a Thursday is a 5K, Friday is the 10K, Saturday is a half marathon, culminating with the marathon on Sunday. So 4 races in 4 days, pretty much covering all of the main distances that most of us are used to hearing about or used to running. So you might be wondering, how did I decide to do this Dopey Challenge in the first place? So this came as a thought among 2 of my best running friends who I run with very often. And I don't know whose idea it was or who mentioned it first. It was probably Heather, who's super into Disney. And actually Disney was her very first marathon like 10 or 11 years ago. And we just started thinking, what could be fun for us to do together? We should do the Dopey Challenge. And we all were like, yeah, let's do it. We knew we had plenty of time. We knew that registration would be coming up. And right then and there, it was basically decided that we were gonna figure out a way to make it happen. We put the registration date on our calendars and we prepared for that. So us making this decision happened right around the time that I was probably finishing up my Houston training block and running the Houston Marathon, which was January of 2023, which went straight into my Boston Marathon training block. So I knew that 2023 was going to be a really focused year for me on my running, trying to run the highest mileage I've ever run, trying to break 3:30 in the marathon, get a PR in the marathon, all the things, thinking that it was probably going to end up happening at Chicago, which happened this fall. So I had 2 big races ahead. So it was just really exciting to me to think about doing something for fun after that and not for time. You might be thinking, wouldn't a normal person just like take a normal break and not do something that almost seems harder, right? You're not only running a marathon, but you're running these other distances. But I knew the training would be different and the mindset would be different going into it for fun versus going into it preparing for a specific time goal. So that made me really excited. And I think registration actually happened right before the Boston Marathon. So I hadn't even run that yet. I had some questions about like what registration looked like for this race. So you really need to be on the computer when they open up registration. So since it was 3 of us running together, we just all were on the phone together, opened our computers, and essentially whoever got on to register first was going to register all 3 of us. So that happened to be my friend Heather. She got in, she registered all of us, and so we just paid her back. So I do recommend, if you're going with a group, one person should register all of you, because it is very possible that if you're registering on your own, some of you might get in and some of you might not. So that's just something to think about. Some of the races sell out very quickly. Like if you are not quick, ready to register right away, you're gonna miss it. Like even if it's 5 minutes later, you might be too late. I don't know which one sold out the fastest, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure they all sold out within that day. So that's something to keep in mind. Make sure you mark your calendars. Make sure your calendar is completely open with your work schedule so that you can get on there and register right away. So after that, we obviously had a lot of time in between actually registering for the race and training for the race. So for me personally, I ran a couple of shorter races in the summer preparing for the Chicago Marathon, which was in October. I then took a week to 2 weeks to recover after the Chicago Marathon. And then that's when the training really began for Dopey. Now I had some questions about what did training look like for Dopey. That's probably a really big topic that I don't want to get into totally for this video, but just so you know, the training for this my mileage was much lower and the intensity was much lower than what my training looked like for Houston, Boston, and Chicago. And that was very intentional. I wanted to bring down the mileage, but I very much know what is necessary to train well for a marathon and just completing it, right? Because that was kind of our goal. And I was training both Renee and Heather as well. So you still need to have a high amount of mileage, having back-to-back days. I was still running 6 days a week. They were running 5 days a week or doing cycling. So still getting in a lot of time on feet is really, really important. Again, if you're training for time, that's different. But I would say if you're doing the Dopey Challenge, if you're going to be doing 4 races in a row, I would not recommend going out for time on the marathon or really any of the races, honestly. And so it's really more about getting the time on feet to prepare you to run 48.6 miles in 4 days, because that's what it is. So in talking about the biggest challenge of this race, it's kind of funny because people automatically are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're gonna run all 4 distances in 4 days. That sounds so intense. It sounds like so much. And yeah, certainly, even being an experienced marathon runner, it was still uncharted territory for me and for all of us. And so going into it, there were definitely nerves and like, hopefully we're training about this correctly. We know we need to manage it really well. We need to take the 5K easy, 10K easy. We can't just go out and like, yeah, even though it's a short distance, we can't just go out and race it. Otherwise, we're gonna have really, really tired legs. And so the whole goal was to get to the marathon feeling really, really good and really get to the last 10 miles, last 10K of the marathon feeling really, really good. Especially since we were running all of it together. You want your entire group to feel good at mile 20 and not have anyone feeling bad or hitting the wall. Obviously, we would have supported each other if any of that would have happened, right? But we wanted to just take it all in, enjoy the experience. And so our whole goal was to enjoy all of it and feel really good so that we could feel like we could race that last portion of the marathon. So the reality is that the biggest challenge was not the distance. And I pretty much predicted this and was talking to people about it ahead of time, but more the early wake ups and the lack of sleep. So we flew out on a Wednesday morning. Our flight was at 6:30 a.m. So you guys know how early you have to be at the airport, and then you have to drive the airport. So we were already up so early here just to make our flight. So all of that started on Wednesday for us. And then we had to get up right around 2:30, 2:40, every single morning for each of those races. And that was Eastern Standard Time, and we are on Mountain Time. So that's 2 hours ahead. So when we're getting up at 2:30 in the morning, it's like we're getting up at 12:30 in the middle of the night back home. Like that's what our bodies are used to, right? So just so you know, like that's really what you're contending with. I would say that's the biggest challenge of all, because by the time you get to marathon day, this is your 4th time waking up extremely early, or if you have an early flight like we did, it's your 5th day in a row. You are very sleep deprived because it's pretty much impossible to get yourself to fall asleep anything before like 8 p.m., right? We tried to go to bed at like 8:30 every night, but I had a hard time falling asleep most nights. And it's just because your body isn't used to that, right? So by the time you're showing up, you're just really sleep deprived. And I think that's the biggest challenge of all for probably most people. So just to keep that in mind, if you're going to be doing this race, is that, yeah, you're not only running a marathon on tired legs, but you're also running a marathon on very little sleep, and your body's just sort of ready to be done. You're also running on fumes and adrenaline, and it's also a really exciting part as well. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about just kind of the logistics of the races and the setup of the races, because there are some similarities to other races. There's also some differences. So when you're getting up that early in the morning, you have to, because the corrals close really early and the races all start at 5 a.m. So the reason that they start so early is so that they can get everybody out of there, essentially because the parks are going to be opening. Like they don't close the parks or anything like that. And on marathon day, you're actually running through a couple of the parks when they are open. But all the other days, that's why they're starting so early. So you have to get on the shuttle to get to the start line. And then there's just a lot of people going in, and you have to get in your corral at a certain time. One of the other hardest parts is because you have to be in your corral pretty early, if you have to go to the bathroom, like there's no bathrooms within the corrals or anything like that. And you actually want to be in your corral even earlier than when it closes if you want to be closer to the front of your corral. So continuing on talking about the challenges that are there, is there's just so many people. We saw numbers like up to 20-ish thousand, but I'm not sure which races have more. I think the half marathon and the marathon had more people than the 5K and 10K, but don't quote me on that. All around though, it's a lot of people, so it doesn't really matter. Just ultimately know when you're in those corrals, it's too hard to get to the front if you get there later. If you want to be in the front of your corral, you need to be getting there when they're opening the corral, probably. In fact, I had an athlete last year run the half marathon, and she was racing it for time, so she got there as soon as the corral opened, which I think was like at 2:33 in the morning, just so she could be at the very front. So that's a really important aspect to know. I won't go into why, but we were not in our correct corrals. All three of us have times that we could have submitted that would put us in a corral for everything, but that didn't happen, which was okay initially because we were like, it's fine, we're running for fun, we're gonna start out slow anyway, so it's fine. Well, it actually ended up being really, really challenging for the 5K. Essentially, we're behind people who are walking, but we want to be running, so you just do a lot of weaving. So I would just tell you guys, first of all, I wouldn't recommend choosing this if you're running for PR or you're running for time. There's plenty of other races to do that. This one is much more about the experience, having joy when you're running, having fun. I would recommend doing it for that. Doesn't mean you can't go for a PR, but you better be at the front of the corral. So just be flexible. You need to just be chill and just know that it's not going to be an ideal situation for racing. And I just think if you go into it knowing that, it's going to be that much better. And honestly, even if we would have been in Corral A or the corral that we were supposed to be in, we still would have been behind people probably who were going at a slower pace than we wanted to, because you have to remember that a lot of these people qualify for the higher corrals, but they are running for fun. They're not running for time. And so they're going to go slower than they would normally. It's very different than like running Boston or Chicago or something like that, where you're in this corral based on your time and pretty much everyone around you is going to be running the same pace as you. One thing I did like about being in the corrals, there's a lot of entertainment. There are DJs or MCs, whatever you want to call them, talking. And so it just distracts you during that waiting time because it's a pretty long time. Again, big crowds, guys. It's not something that I'm normally into. I don't like that stuff typically, but it was absolutely worth it for this experience. I wouldn't have changed it. And you just have to go into it knowing that that's the way that it's gonna be. So yeah, we finished up the 5K. We took it very easy, and you're running in the dark the whole time for the 5K. So again, something different than what you're gonna be used to. You're finished and back on the bus and back in the hotel room pretty early in the morning, which is nice because then you have a full day ahead of you. So we actually went to Magic Kingdom that day, which was the only day that we actually did any of the parks because we wanted to make sure that we were getting a restful day, getting naps in, all of those other days. So I think that ended up working out really, really well for us. So next up was the 10K day, and everything went very much like it did the day before, all very well run. Disney does a great job of all of that. I didn't really talk about before, but once you're in these races, there's characters that you can stand in line for and take pictures. The lines are very, very long. So you just need to be prepared for that if you want to take photos. But I'll have a tip for you in a minute if you do want to take pictures and when you should do that. So we ran a really similar pace in the 10K as we did the 5K. There was still a lot of weaving. You run in Epcot, which is when you run the 5K, run the backside and run the boardwalk. Lots of entertainment along the way and music, and yeah, just a really, really fun atmosphere all around. Okay, so next up is the half marathon, and this is the day where things started to get a little nutty. So the night before, we were at Disney Springs and we were having dinner and doing a little bit of shopping, and we get this notification that they're probably going to be shortening the course for the half marathon day. We saw all day, we were kind of seeing that the weather was getting a little hairy, the forecast for the next day, and because the forecast was predicting lightning later in the morning. So for that reason, they shortened the distance to 7.1, which was super, super disappointing. I felt really disappointed for the people who were just there to do the half marathon. Obviously, it was just one of 4 races for us, but it was still disappointing because Doing a half marathon the day before the marathon is a huge part of the whole challenge, right? And so immediately the three of us were like, we have to get it in. We're doing all 13.1. There's no question. We're not going to take a medal that says 13.1 if we didn't do it. And that was our mindset. If you think differently about that, that's you. But for us, we felt very strongly that we needed to do the 13.1 since we were getting a medal that's 13.1. And because Dopey Challenge is supposed to include a half marathon a day before the marathon. So what we did was get there extra early. We saw a fefew people already running loops in this parking lot. The loop was like 0.21 miles around, and we did 6 miles so that we'd do our 7.1 and we'd equal 13.1. And more people kept jumping in the loop and doing what they needed to do. It was just really cool to see all the people doing that. And one really fun story is that there were these 2 or 3 women. They had pom-poms and shirts and signs, and obviously they were there cheering for someone else in the loop, but they were cheering for everyone going around, almost like it was a race atmosphere. And we would go around and be like, woo, you know, just really excited that they were cheering us on. So we get into the half marathon, aka the 7.1. We kind of run this weird course on the highway. Things were very congested that day, and then finished back in Epcot, which is where all of the finishes are. So we're coming around to the finish line, and Heather's mom and friend were there, but it wasn't them cheering. We hear this cheering, we look over, and I see these women who I don't recognize and don't know. And obviously we're going a little faster and kind of focused on getting to the finish line. And I said to my friends, I'm like, oh, who knows them? Who are they? And they were like, those are the women who were cheering us on during the 6 miles this morning. And they very much like pulled us out. Like they were cheering directly for us, like pointing at us, like, go girls, you're amazing, you know? And it was just so cool to have people cheering for us like that who we didn't know. And I think, you know, those are the stories that come out of these races that you remember. They're so heartwarming and a big reason why we do this, right? And then we finished that race. A lot of people were running in the parking lot afterwards to get their miles in. It started raining later. I never saw any lightning. There might have been some, I'm not sure. But later in the day, you saw people out running around the lake that was at our resort. And it was just really neat to see that all of these people who, committed to the half marathon, and they weren't gonna leave Disney without doing this half marathon. So cool to see. I think honestly, that was my favorite part of the entire race series, was just seeing all of that, the commitment, the dedication, really, really cool. Okay, so that evening obviously was preparing for the marathon the next morning. And I actually just had an athlete phone call this morning where the athlete was asking me about the races and asking me which my favorite one was. And I said, the marathon. It's always the marathon. If you guys have watched other videos of mine, you know that I hold that distance very close to my heart. And I think it's just because no matter what, even when you do things exactly right, even when your training goes exactly right, everything seems so together, even when you're going in with it in the mindset to have fun and go slower, is you never really know what's going to happen in the marathon. And that's what makes it so exciting. Just getting those extra nerves. It's just very different than any of the distances. And it was no different for this as well. I mean, our mindset shifted like immediately that night when we started preparing for the marathon versus the other distances, just laying out all of our gear, making sure we have all of our gels. Do we have our water? You know, just so different. And even that morning, just kind of the vibe was different, knowing that we had 26.2 miles to finish, you know, to get done, to finish this entire thing. And I think I said this before, but like, when you're running in a group of 3 versus just 1, the likelihood of maybe something going awry among the 3 of you is much higher, right? And we were there through it all together, and we would never have left anyone's side. But you know, you guys know how it is. Like, you don't want to be the one that kind of brings down the team, right? So there's that element of nerves as well, and just all of us wanting to have just an amazing experience and work hard and support each other. And like I said before, get to the finish line just strong, right? And that last 10 miles, that last 10K, feeling like we could really turn it up, that no one's feeling bad, anything like that. So race morning, very similar. Corrals, very similar. We were in the corral for a really long time because we wanted to be a little bit closer to the front this time, which meant that we all had to pee when it started. And we're all like, just not feeling that comfortable, right? So we decide, like, you know what? We're here to have a great time. Let's just stop. So we get in line for the bathroom. It wasn't too bad. I think that was the longest line we ended up waiting in. But we were at 0.99 miles when I looked at my watch. And so I just thought that was really funny. So actually our first mile of the entire race was by far the slowest. And that's just because that was the longest line for the bathroom. But we got going after that, and we were so happy that we stopped because we felt good. We felt comfortable. It's very different than when you're going for time and you're forcing yourself to kind of not stop, right? Just totally different mentality. And we ended up stopping to go to the bathroom 2 more times within the first half marathon. So by the time we get to the half, we'd stopped 3 times to go to the bathroom. We really are focused on like running easy pace, just not knowing kind of how your legs are going to handle all the miles that you ran those days before, right? Like, again, that's uncharted territory. Like, you don't know how you're going to feel. At first I was kind of like, well, it doesn't feel like I ran a half marathon yesterday, but little by little, like my calves were kind of tight. Just stuff we all were talking like, you kind of feel things, that you wouldn't normally feel on a marathon day. And yeah, so just really taking care with that, talking to each other. How are you feeling? How are you doing? All the things. And then it started pouring at some point. I love that type of weather. Honestly, it was cloudy the whole time or rainy. If the sun would have come out, it would have been so hot. It would have been so humid. So I just was really thankful that it stayed cloudy the entire time. Honestly, it just ended up being pretty perfect marathon weather. Okay, so the big thing that we decided to do, we were kind of back and forth on if we thought we were going to do it, that we knew that there was a roller coaster option around like mile 15, 16. Heather, who's very into Disney and knows all the things, she knew exactly where it was going to be. And she also said, though, that if it was raining, then we weren't going to be able to do it, that the ride would be completely closed and it wouldn't be an option, right? So we kind of forgot about it. And then we get into Animal Kingdom, which is really cool. They have this really neat tree. Mount Everest is there. It's just a cool atmosphere. So we're like, I don't know, are we going to do it? And I don't know. We weren't really fully thinking about it. And then all of a sudden there it was. There was no line, because I think that would have deterred us a little bit. And the guy that was working there was just like, runners get to go the lightning way, get to go the fast lane, essentially. And Heather asked Renee if she wanted to do it. Renee was like, yes. She asked me, what should we do? I said, let's do it. And it was just such a cool decision that all of us were so excited. And you have to like go weave through to like get to the front of it. And we thought there was going to be a line in there. There was no line. Like, we had to wait for just very briefly while the ride was going.
All right, what are we doing, Renee? We're going to ride a roller coaster!
We get in the roller coaster seats, and it's just like going through your mind, like, what am I doing? Who am I right now? Gosh, like, we will never have an experience like that ever again. It was a very like, you only live once, let's just do this. I was a little worried about how I was going to feel after. I definitely was a little wobbly after we got off, but it was great. No one felt sick. It took a little bit for us to all kind of like, I think, feel back to normal, but like, I'm talking like a few minutes, and then it was great. Such a great experience. I would say if you've got the chance to do it, do it. When else will you ever get to do anything like that? And now we can say we ran a marathon with the roller coaster in the middle of it. So last half of the marathon just went so awesome. The last 10 miles, we all felt really good for the most part. Little stomach things, little leg things, but nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that really held us back. And then, yeah, the last basically 4 to 5 miles, we really picked up the pace a ton. Ran our fastest mile the last mile. I think we did like sub-8s the last full mile. Yeah, and just took it all in.
We've got Renee, Shane, and Heather all running together. Well, go girls!
So we are officially Dopey Challenge finishers, running 48 6-point miles in 4 days. Got all of our medals. You get 6 of them. Okay, so 5K. You're gonna hear a sound. I'm gonna throw them on the ground. 10K. Half marathon that we earned. We did all 13.1. Marathon. So a lot of people, you know, like they just do the marathon, and this is a really cool medal. I really like this one. By the way, I would not recommend doing this for your first marathon, I don't think. So my friend Heather did do it as her first marathon. I think she had a really, really good experience, but I think it can be overwhelming. There's just a lot going on, but I wouldn't choose it personally, but that's me. And then you get Goofy Challenge, which is if you do the half marathon and the marathon, which I think some people are like, why wouldn't you just do the 5K and 10K? But I also think it's probably really hard for people to get the time off from work to do all 4 days too. So that might be why. I still think that's a really big challenge to do a half and then a full. And the Dopey Challenge medal, which I don't know if you can tell, but these little gems light up and it matches our shirt. Those are all the medals. I think I was going to tell you guys that the one thing about the character lines, towards the end of the marathon, the lines are much, much shorter. And that's just because things spread out so much. And at least that's the way it worked for us. So we ended up taking 2 character photos towards the end. I think we only had to wait behind like 1 or 2 people for both of them, whereas lines are insane early on in the marathon and like through the rest of the distances. So that's my tip. If you want a character pick, definitely wait and do it towards the end of the marathon. And I also had people ask about bringing your families and if you should do this alone. Yes, I think it would be very fun to still do alone. I think it would be more fun to do with friends, other people, maybe people who really like Disney. But I still think, especially if you're more of an extrovert and you'll talk to other people and you love Disney, I still think it could be a really, really great experience to do on your own, especially if you have a spectator. Bringing families, I think, would be difficult. We chose not to bring our families. We all stayed in the same hotel room simply because you have to get up so early in the morning. You have to go to bed early. Your kids are going to want to do all the parks, right? So if you have kids with you, that might be really, really tough. But, you know, you can make it work. Everyone's a little bit different on what they can handle on a vacation, all the things. So that night, Renee and I flew back. Heather stayed with her mom and her best friend who came out to cheer us on, which was so amazing. Thank you, Debbie and Mary, for cheering us on. It meant the world to have you there and not even know Renee and I, and still cheer us on alongside Heather was so cool. And I just really appreciate all of the volunteers and my family for supporting me in all this crazy stuff that I do. Highly recommend Dopey altogether, but honestly, even if you just went for one of the races, I think you would love it. And obviously it would be a lot more toned down than what we did here. I wouldn't say do the marathon within the Dopey Challenge as your first marathon. I heard about people doing that. I mean, you can, but one thing I'll say is that if it's something you really want to do, if you've done the marathon before, you're a lot stronger than you think and you can do it. I mean, there's people truly here of all levels doing this race, and it's just one of those things. If you put your mind to it, then you can get it done. Just really, really feel grateful for the experience and just getting to do something for fun, for joy. I think it's so important to have seasons where we are very focused on working really hard for a big goal, and taking seasons where we let off the gas a little bit. I think consistency is so important. You guys know that, hearing me talk about that as a running coach, but it doesn't always have to be all in, you know, going 100%. Like, you can have seasons too where you just back off and do it for fun a little bit. And I think you'll be a lot happier in the process. And when you're ready to go hard again, you'll be that much more rejuvenated and ready to go for it. Thanks for joining me, guys. On the next one, I'll definitely be back to my regular scheduled programming and talking about marathon advice, all the things. But yeah, just appreciate you taking a time out for this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.